Is the commercial drone industry still the Wild West? It's a question we ask a lot. The technology moving faster than regulation, how do you know if the pilot you hired is actually following a standard or just winging it? The answer might scare you. Today, on the Do You Know Drones podcast, we're going deep into the vacuum of industry standards. I'm sitting down with Brandon Beal, CEO of Elevation Aerial Application out of Virginia. He's on the front lines and he has some strong opinions on what needs to change. Let's get into it. Before we begin, do you want to know what separates struggling drone programs from those generating millions in ROI? Grab our free Enterprise Drone Program Maturity Assessment. It's a $2,500 value that reveals your maturity stage, your top 3 quick wins, and your full growth roadmap. And for advanced strategy, sign up for the paid pro version of the Drone Strategist newsletter on Substack. All links are in the description. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Oh man, really excited about this conversation. When we spoke, getting ready for this interview, we were really kind of talking about, we talked about Christmas trees. We talked about spray drones in Virginia, and we talked about, just kind of what the need is. And we talked a little bit about open standards. Now, everyone that follows me knows that I love standards. Like standards, I'm shocked I was not a standardization evaluation officer when I was in the Air Force, because that probably would have been close to my dream job. That being said, standards I think is a huge opportunity for the drone industry. I want to talk a little bit about A, your background, B, and then I want to kind of just dive in, man. I want to dive into what you see as challenges in this industry, what you've seen, your own personal experiences. Tell some stories, entertain us. I know that you will. And then we're going to end it with, what are sort of the biggest opportunities for collaboration, partnership, to solve some of these really hard problems that we're seeing in the industry right now from your perspective? So, Brandon, I'm going to give you the mic, man. Tell me what's going on.
Well, originally I'm from Orlando, so I think I have a little different experience. Most of the guys in my field come from farms. They've had generational family farms, and they're used to that lifestyle. Where I come from in Orlando, not many farms, but I do have a very aviation dense background. Growing up, I worked for a lot of smaller aviation companies that have since grown into larger charter operations and stuff like that. And I think one of the principles that we have to bring over into the drone space is you have, for the first time, so many industries truly entering into what is the aviation space. And I think people twist it around and go, okay, you have the aviation industry going out into these fields. And when you take that sort of stance, I think we talked about it before, you have a massive loss in standards and consistency across different markets, right? And we've seen this a ton of times as guys are flying drones, and a lot of people for different things fly Mavics or Inspires or a whole host of different drones, but they're all doing the same kind of thing. And how can we start to implement a better standard, and how can we ensure that this doesn't conflict with manned aviation missions that are going on? I know the drones that we use are super cool, and it's really nice to be able to not have some of the fears of, auto rotations or very delicate scenarios where it's not really cost effective to take an aircraft. But we always have to be mindful of who is up in the air with us.
I mean, absolutely. And I really I'm going to go back to your beginning comment, because I think this is really important. The difference between aviation spilling out into industries versus industries spilling into or tapping into aviation. Can you highlight that just a little bit? Because from my perspective, I think that's a massive shift. They're not the same. Those are very different experiences, where I see that you have all these other industries that are kind of tiptoeing into aviation, thinking to do sort of the bare minimum a little bit, right? Yeah. Do the bare minimum, and still be in the national airspace or be in aviation within aviation world. The other way around, it's extremely standards based. And I think that's where the disconnect is, right? It's very standards based. It's very checklist. It's very risk averse. It's very like human centric, error, like all of these things, this verbiage, CRM, all these things, they happen within the aviation world. They don't necessarily happen, and it's awkward a little bit for them to happen in these other industries that are just tiptoeing around. So I'm gonna let you dive into that a little bit more.
Well, yeah, and I think this comes at a few different levels. So to your point, I think most drone pilots on a pre-flight checklist, how do I get my drone set up? How do I get it into the air? I think there is some consistency and standardization there, and that's implemented by the manufacturers and their startup processes of the drones. I think the airman stewardship, as we call it, is a whole nother level to that. So, I get to, like you, talk to a bunch of different operators all around the country. And I've spoken to a lot of police officers, guys, flying drones out in the field in very safety sensitive situations, which they're important. We need to learn how to integrate UAVs into law enforcement correctly and all these things. But when the pilots have no standardization besides you can do what you need to do for the safety of the mission, you start getting guys who are saying, I don't care if, it's foggy, you can't see anything. If I need to take that drone up to 500-800 feet and not tell a soul, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and no one's going to say anything. And when that's coming from the top, especially at a law enforcement perspective, I think that kind of doesn't make a clear path down, because really we're seeing heavy adoption of base stations and UAV use in law enforcement. That's where they're testing these, because they have the legal pathway already. They have the regulatory pathway, but is that the right choice? And then you have things like agricultural operations that we're doing, and you have a couple things. You have a lot of manned operators that run with ADS-B off at low level doing agriculture work. And how does this conflict with low level ag operations that also probably aren't all the time pushing the ADS-B signatures in airspace? And how do we get a network to know where all these people are at and communicate? Because to my knowledge of the laws, we're not supposed to get on any ATC frequencies and communicate with any manned aircraft. So you're basically saying, I hope the NOTAM that I put out, I hope all the pilots flying through this area saw my UAV NOTAM and they know the type of mission that's happening. Because for agricultural operations, yes, we're low level a lot of the time, but we're doing a lot of terrain following throughout, multiple things, versus something like a beyond visual line of sight mission, where you're seeing now companies like Census, a good height to get a BV loss waiver is 1,000 feet. So you're flying at 1,000 feet, getting really good data, but how do we standardize that? And I think people are assuming that because there's no man in the aircraft, that the aircraft going down isn't a problem. We've seen this inside of, again, police departments, agriculture, and stuff like that, of the standard should not be my drone goes down 3 times a month. My drone, didn't go down this month. I got 2,000 hours out of my drone without my engine, seizing up on me. And the smaller drones have worked through some of these problems or don't see them, because I believe they're in less high stress environments where, BV loss and agricultural, we're dealing with a lot of weight. BV loss, you're going to be dealing with a lot of different weather conditions, a lot of adverse weather effects coming off mountains, depending on where you're at, and the confliction of airspace. We saw that no company is not disposed to this, with Amazon having one of their drones crash into a crane. And, their standard procedure, as I read it, is they have visual observers go out to a super tall deck twice a day, and they look over the area that they're flying and hope that nothing changes. We're going to hope that no cranes go up. We're going to hope that no equipment's moved. And
hope is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy, and it's not a business model. I mean, if my drones are going down every week, my agricultural clients truly are moving to rely on us season after season after season. So when we come and say, yeah, none of our drones are flying and we can't get parts and we can't do this, you actually start to have some downstream, I think, economic effects that will start to come off of this as well, especially when adoption is ramping up much faster than we said any standardization procedures or anything like that are catching up.
I think so. This is an interesting to dive into this one just a little bit. There's such a big separation between commercial drone operators. And what I mean by that is I would put your BVLOS agriculture operations, even drone light shows, and most DFR operations, especially has to do with docks. They're enterprise operations, right?
Yes.
Like they're operating at a different level. I think the disconnect is there's a lot of drone operators out there that understand the basics. They understand that, hey, you know what, the drone's going to go through this pre-flight checklist, it's going to do this, it's going to beep, it's going to light up, and it's going to do check marks, and then I can just fly and I can just watch it, and I'm going to trust, I want to hope it's going to do its thing. That hope disintegrates when you get to an enterprise operation completely. Like, hope is not a strategy, I said it before, and it just disappears. You can't rely on assumptions. It's a lot of assumptions that operators utilize. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not guilty of it. Like, there's been some times when I've been flying in some agriculture operations and like, yeah, you know what? I can't really, like, I know exactly where the drone is, right? I can look on my screen. I know exactly where it is. There's nothing in the sky around it. Can I 100% tell you exactly where it is right now? Like, by visually looking at it? Yeah, if I super squint this way and go like this, but like in normal, not really. But like, so people push the limits, and like I think pushing the limits within within regulations is okay. But that being said, I think there's enough people that just say, look at the regs, and they're just like, they throw them out. They're like, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do because the drone's going to take care of itself. And I think there's way too many people that rely on that autonomy that haven't operated at an enterprise level where autonomy is utilized as a tool, but not, it is one tool. Like, you now need to have every single protocol, briefing, notification. That's another one that regular commercial drone operators just don't do. Like, look, if I'm going to be going to an area and I know that there are aerial spray operators in that area, I'm going to go to the operator. I'm going to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be flying here. Where are you flying today? Oh, wow, you're going to be flying in my area? You know what? I'm not going to fly today. You take priority, right? I want you to be able to, or I'm going to go operate over here. It's a conversation that people think that, man, if I can just tell ATC that I'm operating, that's it. That's all I got to do. No. That's not it. If there's someone going to be up in the sky, you can see in your area, like with a little bit of pre-intelligence, who flies there. Are there paragliders there? Is there jumpers? Are there people doing soaring operations? There's spray operations. There's hospitals with helicopters. Like, there's so much that it could become overwhelming, especially in the higher, denser areas. But it's interesting that I've noticed that in the higher, denser areas, people tend to want to rely on that automation more rather than less.
Because if something goes wrong, what happens?
I mean, but who do you point to? Like, who do you blame? Like you're like, oh wow, like, you know what? It's you. Like, you're the PIC. You're the only one to blame. You can't blame the manufacturer. You can't blame the operation that flew in your airspace. You can't even blame another drone operator that happened to be in the area, which happens all the time. So I think if I'm paraphrasing a little bit of what you're saying, I think the opportunity is that we as a community, we need to communicate more. We need to up our standards. We need to have standards. So on that, talk to me about standards. I know we were talking a little bit about open standards when we were having our conversation. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of standards to talk about. I think the first one that comes to mind is maintenance standards. In any aviation business, skids up, wheels up is making money, right? So if you're sitting on the ground, you're not making money, and most of the time you're just spending money. So the goal within our business is how do we reduce that downtime to stay in the air as much as possible, as safe as possible, right? If my drone goes down, it's not a $50 arm off Amazon. One of my front boards is $800, a camera's $300-400. It can rack up really fast. So preventative maintenance is something that I don't think has been really looked at yet. And how do we start with the manufacturer, but then implement into the operator of you need to be doing checks at X points, or the ability, we have so much tech around, we have so much tech going into these drones. Why can I not get a port to plug into my computer to be able to have a diagnostics of my engines? I should be able to isolate and test engines. And if you look at successful areas of drones right now, which I think is the FPV space, you can go into a system like Betaflight, you can plug in your drone, you read their disclaimer, which is a good disclaimer, like, hey, all your engines can turn on, but you can then isolate each motor, go up and down, you can look at flight control settings, and you can actually figure out how to source a problem to get back up in the air. So to give you an example, this year we were flying end of the year, and all of a sudden our drones, they started taking turns early, and instead of reducing the amount of spray, they were doing full power spray, cutting corners early, and then kind of diving towards the ground, right? Now, they had just been spraying for over 2,000 acres. They do preventative maintenance every night. What happened? And I spent over 16 hours with me and my co-founder, Caleb, sitting in our hangar, taking apart drones, changing parts over. Come to find out that really you do more harm than good to your entire fleet by swapping parts around, trying to just isolate and source the problem, versus being able to plug in and saying, this is a report of your diagnostic. At least these are the 3 or 4 key areas where it could come from. And you're seeing this because the manufacturers are holding their IP of flight data very, very close chested when it's not that deep. And I think businesses should take on that model of, we're going to give the operators all the information because we're going to continue manufacturing the best drones. And you're not seeing that from a lot of the manufacturers right now, especially the American ones who seem like they're all fighting for their place inside of this space where, like we said, in the FPV market, it's a little bit more developed. You have guys who have been around for a while. And again, it takes this traditional aviation thing of one aircraft, multiple missions, and right to repair. Even with farmers, there is not a farmer that you can talk to or I know that wants to pay for the John Deere subscriptions or the John Deere service they have to pay for to fix their equipment. They should have the right to be able to go in there and fix their equipment, own their data, and then actually do something with it without being burdened by cost or just a subscription wall that says you got to pay us so much to have basic safety standards.
Well
sounds
said,
funny.
sir.
It
No,
funny.
well said. I think that's a big deal. Like what you just said was a big deal because I think there are so many people, especially American drone manufacturers, but they're not alone, right? Like you could point fingers at some of the other folks out there that they don't open up what that looks like. They don't open it up. They like to that level, right? Where like if I build it, if I'm literally building it from components, I can create that system. Now, do we think that they don't have them? I don't think I think they do. I think they do. I just don't think that they're going to share with operators. Why? I think it's do you think it's liability? Do you think it's something that they're like, we don't want to open our kimono all the way up and open ourselves up to be like, hey, look, like we're not necessarily the best systems. So it's a vulnerability thing. Like they see it as a vulnerability. But you know what's funny? So I'll tell my own story. we were evaluating at a previous company. I was evaluating heavy lift drones for large LiDAR equipment. And we're like, okay, here are all the things. And it had to be NDA compliant. Couldn't be Chinese. We're like, okay, so here's we go. We're going to start taking a look. We're looking at Alta. We're looking at this. We're looking at Inspirefly. We're looking at all these people. When we were evaluating and starting to scale with one company, they'll remain nameless. We had 2 or 3 drone crashes. Now, we had a fairly large fleet. We bought a fairly large fleet of them, right? Non-DJI, large fleet. They started to crash. Not all of them, but like enough where it was concerning. And they would just replace them. And we're like, and then we got to like a point where, like maybe the third one or whatever, they were like, we think it's you. We're like, well, what do you mean you think it's you? Like, we've been operating for years and we haven't changed our SOP. We haven't changed, like, the only thing that's changed is the equipment. I don't think it's us. And like, you haven't really showed us that it's us. So that was an example of what I believe is poor communication between an operator and a manufacturer. Now, let me flip it. We changed from that and we went to a different US-based drone company. And same thing happened. Look, in some of these enterprise operations, you're pushing the equipment to its very edge because you got to find out if it could do it. So, I mean, like, you still stay safe, but you got to push it. So we were pushing this equipment and had a motor failure or something, a battery disconnect, something like that, and the drone fell out of the sky. Okay, we get it. It happens. Went to the manufacturer again. Okay, so here's what happened. This time it was only one. And we said, okay, so same SOP, what's going on? They're like, okay, we want to partner with you to understand what happened. Here's a brand new drone. Let's do the same thing. Let's push it again. And that's a different spirit of engagement. I mean, that's not just customer service. That's like, we need to partner with the people that are doing enterprise operations. Manufacturers, hear this. We need to partner with operators that are pushing in enterprise applications because they're not the edge case. They're the ones that are buying your equipment at scale and want to be able to use it. So same thing with UAS spray operations, very complex, large drones, doing a lot of things, being pushed. The same thing happens at any enterprise operator. Look at a mine site, look at anywhere. Even DFR operations are an enterprise operation of sorts because they're constantly doing sorties, right? They're constantly being utilized, right? They're not making money. They're not doing their mission unless they're up in the air. So that's the difference. Like there are prosumer or even professional applications where, you know what, I might fly my drone once a month or once a week or 2 times a week and still do fairly well as a business. That's not what happens in enterprise operations. They're being constantly flown day in, day out, 4 months, many hours a day. These are the people that are actually growing the industry at massive exponential rates, and the manufacturers need to realize that. So there's an opportunity, manufacturers, to work with the drone community, work with the operators, and open up the kimono a little bit, be a little vulnerable, showcase that you want to partner with us, and not just hear about what we think about your specs, right? We want to hear about, I put out a LinkedIn post about this a little bit today, and it's like, it's not about the specs, right? It's about the workflow. It's about the process. It's about the whole operation, the big O operation, not like, man, I followed this checklist, or man, here's my EHSMS. Like, these are disparate pieces of an entire system. And it's that entire system that needs manufacturer level support and, in my opinion, needs an upgrade on the operator side as well. Because look, if I'm gonna point a finger at the manufacturer, there are 6 more pointing back at me. So like, yeah, like there's an accountability piece.
You hit the nail on the head. So I saw your post this morning about it, and I find it very interesting. Me and my co-owner estimate about 60 to 75% of our mission process is administration. The flight and actually going out there when everything else has been checked should be the safest, most streamlined parts. And yes, there is a time where something happens and you're just not expecting it. but also, like we said, teaching these pilots at a infield level to be able to put it down in a safe spot, to have certain follow throughs with that. And then on the flip side, from the administration standpoint, making better workflows, because that's what's actually going to gain this technology, because everyone's under the lens of the customer, right? So if I'm not out flying, or a lot of industries in the drone world use a per hour basis. Still, we do per acre, but a lot of them use per hour. That's all cost that's just going to rise consumer frustrations. And it doesn't have to be that if we start to implement these things. And like you said, these enterprise operations are at a different level. I just looked it up this morning. Elevation in the past couple of years has done over 28,000 takeoffs and landings. That's a lot of flights, and we're in the agricultural space. Take that to a delivery service, final mile delivery service that's constantly operating. If you don't put in those standards, there's going to be a night where drones start falling out of the sky left and right. And if you're not also establishing the correct flight channels, what should drones be flying over and what should they not be flying over? And that really comes down to configuration. Just like in traditional aviation, if you have an engine out in a R-22 versus a King Air, your glide distance, good or bad, is different, right? Sometimes getting it right down in a helicopter and you're in an ag space, quite safe. But there's other situations where you want that King Air's longevity to be able to have that good glide slope to be able to get to the ground safely. And how do we recover these things? And I think that even goes to an FAA level of the consumer, or the operators are scared to say anything because they feel like they're going to get hit with an $80,000 fine. And you have these rising tensions with manned applications and unmanned applications to where they don't respect one another. And that mutual respect is going to be the thing that gets us there. And like you said, you guys had a bunch of drones out for testing. We're seeing problems, how the manufacturer reacts, what they're doing about that. And then also, like you said, there's standards for using the equipment that's on the drone, but there needs to be standards for the drone. And that's why I always push this one aircraft, multiple mission sets. Because when you look at it in an economic standpoint, I need to be able to have a streamlined workflow of how we're going to look over these aircraft, how I can bulk order parts, how I can actually grow to drop my customer prices and stay up in the air. It's 100% the name of the game that we need to be moving towards, whether it's a group of people creating the standards or the entire community as a whole.
So this last question, I'm gonna voice it a little different. So you fly over a lot of Christmas trees. So let's talk about presents. Let's talk about gifts. So what's one gift that you would give the drone industry that you're excited to be working on at Elevation? What's one thing that you're working on at Elevation that you want to be as a gift to the drone community, that overcomes a challenge, that opens up an opportunity, that fills a gap? What's that one thing that you're excited to work about?
I think being able to not rely, like we said, on manufacturers. We talked about this the first time. If you're always looking to someone else, oftentimes you're going to come up short on a few things because, their venture capital, their just priorities are different down there. One of the things that we've been working on with another one of my partners is an engine testing kit for ag drones, right? How can we isolate an engine without taking apart the entire drone and potentially causing more damage and stuff like that? Because on these larger aircrafts, the screws and the processes to keep the screws tight, torqued down to the proper setting with the amount of vibrations that we're going through are something that we're trying to spec out, as well as being able to plug in, test your engine, and then we have a little cap of the vibration piece on it that's able to sense the amount of vibration that's going through that arm? And can we attach these to the drone in different areas to, one, collect a baseline, and then off that baseline, be able to figure out off certain frequencies what potential errors could be, right? If we're getting a hard vibration in the engine area versus the back mount of the arm, most likely in the motor base where the two motors connect to the actual arm, there's something loose there, right? And I think giving operators the ease and the ability to buy that at a very reasonable rate, whatever it costs to build it, be able to plug that in and be able to create their own standards is how you'll get people like you, me, guy over in Kansas, guy over in California to start talking and going, you work in this terrain, I work in this terrain, but we're seeing these same correlated issues. Well, maybe instead of there being a whole issue with the entire drone, there's really just an issue with the arm mount. And I think, to your point, the reason we're not seeing the manufacturers do that is I saw an interesting survey the other day that said most drone operators, when they're buying or looking at a drone, are looking at the reputation or brand name of the drone company that they're buying from. So if that company is putting out good safety material, does it really make their marketing material look as awesome? No. And I'm waiting to see the company, and I've worked with a few who, again, remain nameless. But I think there are some companies that are looking at that, and a lot of these companies come from the traditional aviation space. Because again, we're not rewriting some of the things. We need to learn how to implement from what's already worked for us. And regardless of what people say, I personally think we have one of the best national airspaces in the world, and I'd love to see it stay at that. So as we can work on maintenance and we can work on, like you said, standards for different industries and using sensing equipment inside of that, I think you'll allow the operator to just prosper and really go out and say, what can these drones do, while knowing there's always going to be downtimes and things like that, just like in the commercial helicopter or fixed wing space.
Wow. Yeah. But man, we've went kind of all over the place, and I love it. But staying hyper focused on standards, sort of open, transparent maintenance standards that we can communicate amongst industries, not just within an industry, within industries, as this equipment starts to get more and more out there. Being able to have a conversation at a technical level, like almost like you're going to a car show, right? And you want to talk about not the specs, you want to talk about, man, I was doing this, and or mechanics, and like it's the same thing. Like people that do A&P, or like a lot of them are pilots, and they're really good pilots because they truly understand the performance of the aircraft, and they know what to do about it. They know whatever shake and shimmy and like they know what it all means. I think that there's an opportunity there within this space to have that level of confidence about the equipment that you're flying, that you can have these common collaborative conversations where everyone can get smarter because you're all speaking the same language. I think that's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned having a tool to be able to diagnose individual motors and without having to strip it apart. Yes, the industry needs these things. I fully agree with that. They also need these conversations. So for that, Brandon, I'm very thankful. Thanks for joining me today. This has been a great conversation. I think it is elevated. It is pointing some fingers. There's been more fingers pointed at us as well, right? We're holding ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
And look, we're just, the whole thing is we got to get real. We got to get real about what this industry is, because it's not slowing down. It's speeding up. And as that's going to happen, are we heading towards a big wall that we're going to crash into? Or do we have good intelligence that we know that the wall's out there and we're building a way to get around it? It's that simple. So if we break it down like that. So man, really appreciate you joining the show. I think this is very educational for all of our listeners and for anyone that this will reach. So Brandon, man, I just really appreciate it. Any final words?
No, thank you for your time. And I hope, like you said, that we can start building a community that wants to be transparent and know that you're never in the wrong for doing something. You're definitely in the wrong for not doing something.
I like it. Fantastic. That's good words to end with. Everyone, thanks for joining us here on the Do You Know Drones podcast. Until next time, safe flying.